Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever viewed a species that is so complex you just can't understand it? Have you ever seen those videos where a scientist is looking through a microscope and you just really can't understand what they're talking about? Well, today we're going to be sort of looking at that stuff, except in chess and human form. We're going to be looking at one of the most popular rivalries in chess, which is Kasparov and Karpov. This is a game 16 from one of the most popular world championships where Kasparov won his title against Karpov. So let's dive right into it. Here, Kasparov is black and he won with an extremely nice knight sacrifice. We have e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4. We're transitioning into a Smith-Morra. And we have this interesting line. I don't think this is such a popular line. I'm pretty sure the theory here is knight c3, talking about all those dragon people or whatever. I don't even know what this is called. I think it's Smith-Morra, right? Or is it X? It depends on what black plays. But we have d6. I can understand this move. White's idea in the Sicilian in this e6 setup is that this d6 and dark squares around the king or queen are weak. So white will effectively try to target them using the knight or a kind of setup which is known as the Marquise bind, which is c4, which establishes to continue with knight to c3 and go to knight to b5, which also is one of our plans. So I would rather play the Marquise bind, but Karpov chooses this line, which is interesting. d6. Kasparov doesn't want to allow Karpov to get any access. This doesn't shut out any of White's plans, but it temporarily refutes them. c4. This is a kind of, I guess you could say, accelerated or de-accelerated Marquise bind, where White is going to try to use his pawns and attack at Black's small center. Knight f6, knight to c3, regular development, no need to rush. a6. Kasparov decides to go with this move immediately, kicking out the knight. Karpov's idea is that the knight will now go to c4 after the pawn on c4 is removed. c4 rather than d4 is a better square because on c4, White now targets the d6 pawn. On d4, White is not really doing anything. This is also an important point. I feel like a lot of people would here just play knight to d4 rather than the less odd knight to a3. But you always have to consider every move. Knight to a3 doesn't lose any material. And it is absolutely fine. The only thing you need to be careful of is d5. d5 is probably why I won't play this move. But there is some preparation to disable this idea. cd4. e5, knight to b4. You obviously can't capture here. There is no way to get rid of any of the defenders of the pawn, so knight to b4. This is not really a gambit as Black is immediately regaining the pawn, but in return, White gets development faster than Black does, including White's extra move, bishop to e2, bishop to c5. Again, no need to rush with taking pawns. You can wait. Castles, bishop to f3. So, officially around here, it is obvious that Kasparov is going to gambit the pawn. If he wasn't, he was going to just take this. But he decides he's actually going to attempt to gambit the pawn. And in return, he has this weak pawn, which he can target throughout the entire game. And these knights are kind of weird, since knight to c4 can be met with b5. And the knight on c4 no longer serves a purpose since the d6 pawn is traded off. So we have bishop to f5. But in return, I want to mention White gets to keep an extra pawn, of course. And he has still good development, and the e-file is up for takings. Bishop to f5, bishop to g5. I don't know why I didn't play rook to e1. No, wait. Yeah, I mean, I know why he didn't play rook to e1. He wants to take advantage of the bishop not being able to defend this diagonal, and he is going to tie the knight down to not being able to really move, because else there is knight to c2, and then after rook to a3 we have knight to d3. In action, let's say knight to c4, here, 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 not here. For example, well, it doesn't work in the case right now, but still, let's say queen to b3, rook to e8, rook to no wait, knight to c4. Now there is this nice tactic: knight to c2, rook to b1, and this wins a rook because you attack the queen simultaneously the rook also. But Karpov probably planned this, and he saw that, as we saw in the previous variation, if you immediately play knight to c4, knight to c2, rook to b1, this is unavailable because actually white can just capture. And now the file is open for the queen, so now white is actually up a point of material, 2 points. Usually you want to know that two pieces for rook is bad. As you can see here, that like this rook on a8 is definitely not worth any two of these pieces, which I'm highlighting right now. So, but in the endgame, it can become harmful. Yet, white is much better because white is also up a pawn, which is included with the package. So bishop to g5 instead. I don't prefer this move. Rook to e8, queen to d2. Karpov connects his rooks from any danger. b5, preventing knight to c4, and now Kasparov has completed his plan of completely tying the knight down. Even knight to b1 is met with knight to c2, so he can't even play knight to b1. Rook a to d1. White is going to try to now capitalize on this discovery. If you rush it with this, black can just play like rook to a7 and rook that, I don't know what happened. No, what? And rook to d7. So black is fine. Instead, rook to a d1. Karpov doesn't want to waste this move immediately. Instead, he'll prepare it. Oh, sorry, the mic. Knight to d3. Knight to b1. So now that knight to d3 is played and rook to a d1, the knight is free to go back to b1, though the knight doesn't really have any prospects. It's likely going to go to d2, where the queen is currently not blocking. Or it's going to go to b1 and do absolutely nothing. So we see h6. I mean, this move can be played anytime. Bishop to h4, and now b4. Kasparov is going on the aggressive. He's now going to try to override Karpov's queenside. Knight to a4, bishop to d6. The pawn is now successfully blockaded, meaning that it is now utterly useless in any sort of fashion. It stands there as a threat, but as long as the bishop is secure, there is nothing white can do about it. Bishop to g3. So Karpov is instigating and saying, trade the bishop, you'll have to. Rook to c8, b3. B3 seems as an odd move, but it's actually a pretty smart move. See, white's problem was that his knight is, again, utterly useless. It literally can't go to any square. So he would like to move his queen to... He literally can't move his queen. So maybe he'll play rook to e1, which he can't play. Okay, just let's say that he could somehow get his queen out, right? Like, if he took here like this. I know. This, this. It's kind of stupid. Just imagine nothing is hanging. He would want to play queen to f4. The Okay, never mind. Okay, there is literally no way that he gets his. But the like basic plan is that um when he gets his queen out, he wants this b2 pawn to be safe, which right now his knight on a4 is tied to, and also it helps protect his knight on a5, which really doesn't have any prospects. So there are three purposes of this move. Firstly, as I mentioned, two of them, he wants to set his queen free if it ever gets out. Literally, now his queen has zero moves. He wants to defend his knight, and also, I didn't mention that he wants to trade off this d3 knight. So this is a relatively smart move, as I mentioned. g5, this is a really aggressive but nice move. Basically, white only has one piece defending this square right here. And Kasparov doesn't have any particular reason of taking on g3 and giving up his solid bishop. So, Kasparov would like to make a reason. If he can play g4 and king to g7, king to g7 first, then he will win this pawn in e4, which he wants. So bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, g3. He wants Karpov wants to secure his bishop so that if g4, he can put it back on g2, not h1. Knight to e7. As we notice, Kasparov is getting all his pieces into play. He's going to activate his knight with either knight to e5 or knight to c5. We have bishop to g2, just a prophylactic backing up move, getting away from any g4 or knight to e5s. Queen to f6. This is also another point of knight to f6. The main action can be deciphered to be on the king side, as the queen side is strictly locked up, which Karpov took as a measure to try to clog up this side of the board. So Kasparov's main target is now forcing Karpov to make his play defending this pawn, because if he loses this pawn, just imagine a knight teleported here. He would be completely lost if this knight was defended, of course, because um White's extra pawn is the only future prospects he has. Right now, look at Black's pieces. They're warring in Karpov's faces. He has no defense. He can only hope to linger on and try to make Kasparov blunder somehow and try to win the game. But right now he has no prospects. So, a3. I don't think this is a relatively good move. Karpov wants to activate his knight, but I don't think this is the best way. I mean, you can't really move your queen. There might not be actually any other way. He can't move any of his pieces. It's literally like Zuxon. It's actually crazy. It's literally Zuxon. You'd have to play h3 or a3. I think I would just play h3 first and wait, because I really don't want to unclog the queen side, as I think this is probably exactly what Black wants. Kasparov wants. This, I mean, it's also pretty fine because Kasparov can't really make any progress on this side, because all he's doing is making his rook stare at this file and really nothing else. So we have a5. We defend the b5 pawn, b4 pawn. ab4, and Karpov has accomplished moving his queen. Yay! You got to move your queen. You got to move your queen, but the rest of your position is in shambles. So now, like, rook to a8 even pins this knight if he wants it. Bishop to g6. This is a prophylactic move. Basically, Kasparov wants to attack really badly So you'll probably try to double on this file. For example, rook to e7, rook to e8, and then rook to um, e2, and then knight takes f2. d6, g4. d6 is now a sacrifice because now actually white can survive because his bishop is roaring down the diagonal in a surprising turn of events. Taking the pawn pins your pieces. Now we're gonna get skewered like on a shish kebab. So d6, because Karpov is sacrificing his pawn to open up his lines. And you know when you're trying to get a draw with white that things aren't okay. So g4, because basically if he takes, it's a draw declaration. But Kasparov wants to play on. He knows that he can probably win this. g4. Basically, this wants to also play like h5 and h4, though this is a more subtle plan, and I feel like the easier would be rook to e6 or rook to e5, rook to e5 probably, and then rook to e8 and continue with that plan. But this is Kasparov's plan, and I really can't argue against it. Queen to d2, king to g7. He defends h6 pawn, nothing special. f3. Now, Karpov is making a break for himself. He is attempting to open up the F file and end this on. This is just losing. I don't care. You allow white so much counterplay. This is just not okay. So you can't take. So he takes this d6 pawn. Now there is no threat. He can escape with a check whenever he wants, if there's any problems. fg4. And he wins his pawn back. He doesn't want to take it immediately. Again, you don't want to take stuff you can take later. You say, oh, I can play like, I don't know, g4, g5. Yeah, but then you run into not that, but you run into here. If you take, you lose your life. You need to, and then there's smothered if you don't take, of course. But if you do take, you're just down material, of course. So actually, he doesn't sacrifice the pawn. Rather, he wants to take this pawn with his knight and fork Karpov. And look at how he utilizes all his pieces. His rooks are roaring down the E and C files. His knight on d3 is securing everything, threatening knight to f2. His bishop on g6 is supporting this whole diagonal. And this knight on f6 is about to join the game. That's the final piece he needs. And look how messy this board is. That's how complex these guys' display is. Rook to f4. Wait, I need to select him. I mean, it doesn't really do anything. Actually, he initiates nothing really. I don't know what I was saying. Queen takes d3. He kind of initiates a knight sacrifice, though there's this check. And, I mean, what else can you really play? Think about it. If you're literally like in Zugzwang. It's so surprising. Like, I'm gonna clear this board for a second. If I can clear the board, I think I need to click off. Yeah. Okay. So g4, we've discussed, is met with knight to g4, which loses. h3 is literally your only good move. And then after even the simple rook to e7, you have nothing. Nothing. You have to do this again, and you lose your life. So h3 is your only move. Any knight moves loses that knight. Knight to b2 loses the knight too. Any rook move loses the rook with either rooks except here, which checkmates. I guess you could play a bishop move. Any of these bishop moves are fine. I guess those are a few good moves, but still you risk opening up this diagonal for this bishop. So And the queen literally can't move to any of the scores except a2, and I don't think that's the most optimal score to go in this moment. So this is literally zugzwang, which is really interesting. Knight to e4, queen to d3, and this game ends with a beautiful taking of the queen and a queen sacrifice. If you capture here, there is mate. Eventually, not mate, but you win too much material. Nice queen sacrifice to end the game. If knight to b2, queen to f2, and you have rook to e8, rook to e1, and you're destroyed. You take here, and then rook to e1 check, and here Karpov resigned. Now you know how complex and beautiful of a player Kasparov was. Thank you, like and subscribe, get us back to a lot of subscribers, and see you later. Bye.